everybody, and welcome back to I Just Want to Talk About the Bible. If this is your first time joining us, then let me just welcome you and say that I am so glad that you're here. My name is Christian Keeter, and I live in the southeast of the United States of America with my amazing, beautiful, godly wife, Lacey, and our two wonderful daughters, Felicity and Serenity. So today we're going to begin by looking at a passage from 1 Samuel chapter 4. Now, just to give some super simple historical context, this takes place near the beginning of the ministry of the prophet Samuel, and therefore before Israel's first king Saul. And if you want more context than that, then you can, of course, go read 1 Samuel chapters 1 through 3. But for the sake of our conversation today, we're just going to keep things primarily focused on what we're going to be looking at today, because if we were to get too detailed with a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today, it would actually probably obscure what we've been talking about. So we're just going to have kind of a very specific focus today. So having said that, 1 Samuel chapter 4, beginning partway through the first verse, says, "Now Israel went out to battle against the Philistines. They encamped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines encamped at Aphek. The Philistines drew up in line against Israel, and when the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the field of battle. And when the people came to the camp, the elders of Israel said, 'Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies.' So the people sent to Shiloh and brought from there the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned on the cherubim, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God." So that was partway through verse 1 down through verse 4 of 1 Samuel chapter 4. So what's going on here? What's going on is Israel is fighting the Philistines, as they do multiple times, and they lose this battle. Around 3,000 of their soldiers die, and so they lose this battle. And so their solution is to go get the Ark of the Covenant and bring it into battle. And so just very quick note about the Ark of the Covenant, because again, this is one of those areas where we could get really, really detailed. But I'm going to flip over here to Exodus 25. This is about the Ark of the Covenant. And it says this in Exodus 25, 21 and 22. "And you shall put the mercy seat on the top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I shall give you. There I will meet with you. And from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, I will speak with you about all that I will give you in commandment for the people of Israel." And so what I want us to see from this passage is that one thing that he said there at the beginning of verse 22, "There I will meet with you." And so I want us to understand that the Ark of the Covenant is going to be associated with the presence of God here. This is something that's very important for us to understand. The Ark of the Covenant is associated with the presence of God. Now you might reply, "But Christian, isn't God everywhere?" And yeah, of course he is. I mean, David said in Psalm 139, he said, "Where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me." That was Psalm 139, 7 through 10. But it's but the presence of God dwelled in the tabernacle just in a special way. And later the temple. And where was the Ark of the Covenant kept? It was kept in the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, the innermost part of the tabernacle, and like I said, later the temple. And so think of it maybe as, as you approach the tabernacle in the Holy of Holies, as approaching the throne of God, entering into his throne room. And so yes, God is everywhere, but his presence dwelled in a very special way in the most holy place where the Ark of the Covenant was. And so the Ark of the Covenant is, as we saw, it's associated with his presence. So, and actually, let me just quickly, this is a little bit of a side note, but this is, important enough to include here. You'll remember that over the tabernacle in the wilderness, there was the pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. And remember that in the New Testament, in Acts chapter 2, when the Holy Spirit came and indwelt the disciples, what was above their head? Well, it was a tongue of fire. And so just like God's presence dwelled in the tabernacle, his presence now dwells in his people through the person of the Holy Spirit. And so if you're born again, you are, in a figure of speaking, you are a tabernacle. You are, think about how the New Testament puts it. We are the temple of God. His presence dwells inside of us now. it's almost as though, our hearts have become the Holy of Holies. So I just wanted to carry that forward. And so, anyone who's listening to this, who's born again, you have the Holy Spirit, and so, God dwells in you in a special way. And so, coming back to this passage here, so they take the Ark of the Covenant. We're back in 1 Samuel chapter 4. They take the Ark of the Covenant into battle, or they go and they get it, and the logic is, okay, we're going to win now that this is here. So let's go back and look at verse 3 really quickly, part of verse 3, where it says, let us bring the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies. That's the end of the verse. Now, I emphasize the word it. There's a footnote here that says, or he. And so that word can be translated as it or he, apparently. And so if they're saying that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies, it's almost like reducing, it's as though the ark itself, the box, is going to somehow save them, as though it were like some sort of good luck charm or something like that. Or if they're saying that he may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies, that would mean that, in a manner of speaking, they're trying to force God's hand. It's like, okay, if we bring this here, God has to blank. He has to give us the victory. It's almost like they're trying to force his hand. And so either way, whichever way it's meant here, it's wrong-headed. It's not the right way of thinking. But before we go on, I do want to point out that if you were to flip back to Joshua, I know we're hopping around a lot right now, but it'll be okay. If you go back to Joshua, the Ark of the Covenant has been associated with some incredible, miraculous moves of God. And so here, Joshua chapter 3, they crossed the Jordan. This is after Moses has died. Joshua is leading them into the promised land. They reach the Jordan River and they cross over the Jordan. And so Joshua 3, I'll read verse 14 through 17 here. It says, so when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of the water, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest, the waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan. And those flowing down toward the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off. And the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. Again, that was Joshua 3, 14 through 17. And so did you notice how many times the word ark or Ark of the Covenant was repeated in that passage? And so what happens is the priests are bearing the Ark of the Covenant. They step into the water of the Jericho, which there's this parenthetical statement that says that it overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. And so it's not just a gentle little stream here. And so they step in there, and then the waters get suspended and they pass on dry ground. And so it's similar to the parting of the Red Sea in that way for the generation prior. And so do you see the Ark of the Covenant was present in this incredible move of God. If you flip over a few chapters to Joshua chapter 6, arguably the most famous part of the entire book of Joshua, and the entire conquest of Canaan for that matter, which is the Battle of Jericho, the Ark of the Covenant also plays a role here. And so in Joshua chapter 6, let me just start in verse 1 here. It says, now Jericho was shut up inside and outside because of the people of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all the men of war going around the city once. Thus shall you do for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat. And the people shall go up, everyone straight before him. So Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the Ark of the Covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, "Go forward, march around the city, and let the armed men pass on before the ark of the Lord." Similar to chapter 3, did you notice how many times the ark was mentioned, especially there at the end? And so what happened, of course, this is Jericho. This is a pretty familiar story. They marched around the city once a day for 6 days, and then 7 times on the 7th day. And the ark was being marched around the city as well. And so it's we see then, of course, the walls fall down flat. They take Jericho. It's the first battle and first victory of the Promised Land conquest, and we know the story pretty well. But I just wanted to point it out, both of these stories, because the ark of God was present in both of these really miraculous stories. But there's a very important detail here at the beginning of Joshua 6, where the Lord says, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand." I have given Jericho into your hand. The Lord, is the one who gave Jericho into their hand. It's not the presence of the Ark of the Covenant. It's the Lord. The Lord is the one who gave it into. It's not just the presence of this physical box, to put it another way. This is important for us to understand. However, God had a very special purpose for the Ark of the Covenant. He was the one who commanded them to build it. He told them how to build the tabernacle, where it to go, where it should go, and how, all this stuff. And so, but the point is this: it's not the Ark, it's the Lord. So coming back here to 1 Samuel chapter 4, we have biblical precedent for seeing the Ark of the Covenant being present in miraculous moves of God, whether it be the stopping up of the water so they could pass across the Jordan on dry land, or perhaps similar to this, the Battle of Jericho. The Ark of the Covenant was present there, and there was this amazing supernatural victory. Again, we can't read the minds of these people in 1 Samuel chapter 4. But at the very least, we can say this: they believed that by bringing the Ark of the Covenant into the battle, it would somehow guarantee the victory. And again, the Ark of the Covenant has been present in times of victory before, but does that guarantee victory now? So, in the last verse here that we read of the first section, 1 Samuel 4:4, it says, "And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God." Eli was the priest at the time, and Hophni and Phinehas were his wicked sons, and they were not good guys. And that's another story for another time. So, resuming in verse 5, let's see what happens now that the Ark of the Covenant is present. "As soon as the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel gave a mighty shout, so that the earth resounded. And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shouting, they said, 'What does this great shouting in the camp of the Hebrews mean?' And when they learned that the Ark of the Lord had come to the camp, the Philistines were afraid, for they said, 'A god has come into the camp.' And they said, 'Woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us! Who can deliver us from the power of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck down the Egyptians with every sort of plague in the wilderness. Take courage and be men, O Philistines, lest you become slaves to the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Be men and fight." And so that's what they said. That was 1 Samuel 4:5-9. So the ark comes into the camp. Israel lets out this mighty shout. It says, so that the earth resounded. And then, they are rallied. They are, courageous. They are ready to go because of the presence of the ark of the Lord. And the opposite kind of seems to happen a little bit with the Philistines. They rally themselves as well, where they're saying, "Take courage and be men, O Philistines." But it's like when they see this, what's their first response? It says they were afraid, and they're saying, "Woe to us, woe to us." They said, "A god has come into the camp." And it's interesting. They point back generations prior to God's deliverance of the people of Israel from Egypt. He said, "These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with every sort of plague in the wilderness." Now they kind of, you can hear how they're filtering it through their own sort of religious framework. But it's cool that, generations later, it's like they're still talking about that. And, and here we are, many generations later still talking about it. So here it is. The ark is present. What's going to happen? And also one other detail that's important. Notice what they said. They said, "A god has come into the camp." And so it would seem that the Philistines are now thinking in terms of, "Oh my goodness, the God of the Israelites is here fighting on their behalf." Which, it's important to note this, and I'll say why in a minute. That means that if the Israelites were defeated, the Philistines might think that their God was also defeated. So I'll come back to that in a minute. So verses 10 and 11, we'll just finish out this little section. It says, "So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and they fled, every man to his home. And there was a very great slaughter, for 30,000 foot soldiers of Israel fell. And the ark of God was captured, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died." And so that was down through verse 11. And so, oh my goodness, this defeat is far worse than the first one. The first time about 4,000 people died, and this time it says 30,000 foot soldiers of Israel fell. The presence of the Ark of the Covenant did not guarantee them victory. Like I said at the beginning here, their thinking was wrong-headed, whether they viewed it as a good luck charm or as though they were forcing God's hand. Neither one of those ways, of thinking were right. But their plan did not go well. It did not go how they thought. And honestly, it didn't really go how even the Philistines were afraid it would go. And so they fled. And not only that, the Ark of God was captured. The Philistines took the Ark of God. Eli's two sons died. Eli is going to die shortly thereafter whenever the news is delivered to him. So this is a very interesting. This is interesting. And so they take, just fast forwarding a little bit, and I just want to point this out, and then we'll come back and look at the main point of what we're talking about today, just because I want to point this out. Sometimes when you're looking in the Bible, let's use the example of Elijah and the prophets of Baal and Asherah. You remember this in 1 Kings, around 1 Kings 18. But what happens? Elijah challenges them to a contest, and he said, let's see whose God is the real, true, living God. And they set up the two altars, and he lets the prophets of Baal select the bull and slaughter it, and they cry out to Baal for hours, and nothing happens. Elijah starts making fun of them, and then Elijah calls out to the Lord after dousing the sacrifice in water, and immediately the Lord answers by fire. And so not only was this a contest between Elijah and the prophets of Baal, it was and Asherah, it was also a contest between God and Baal. Let's see who's stronger. Let's see who the living God is, right? There's actually a really wonderful children's book that that we read to our girls called The God Contest, and it actually draws that point out explicitly. Fantastic book. Buy it for your kids. Buy it for yourself. Go buy the book. So so we see, but there's a similar sort of thing here, because what do the Philistines do? They take the ark and they put it in the temple of their god Dagon. So not only does it look like that Israel's been defeated, it looks like their God was defeated too. But of course, the Lord's not going to allow that. It's Israel tried to basically control the Lord, it seemed, and that and they try to basically force his hand. But God is not going to. He doesn't let Dagon be exalted over him. And so what happens is they walk in there, and Dagon is face down before the Ark of the Covenant. And so the Philistines help their, the statue of their god Dagon back up, which, and if you have to help, if they have to help their god back up, I think that says a lot about their God, does it not? And then the next morning they come in, same thing, except Dagon's head and hands had been chopped off. And then, it says the hand of the Lord is heavy on the Philistines. They get these tumors. They start moving the ark around because nobody wants it anymore, because how the Lord is afflicting them. And finally, they send it back to Israel. They send it back to Israel. So it's like God defeats the Philistines without the army of Israel, and the ark comes back. And so I wanted to include that as it passed through there, through the Philistine territory, and then came back. So, but coming back, what are we talking about today here? So there's something, I want to connect this to our lives in a way that I hope will be very helpful. And it's this. So as we've seen, the Ark of the Covenant has been present in the past at miraculous moves of God, right? Like we see it was there at the crossing of the Jordan, for example, or perhaps the Battle of Jericho. And those were the instructions of God. He told them, he said, carry the ark around the city. Like he had given them instructions, but what we need to remember is that God is the one who gave them the victory. And so copying and pasting this formula does not guarantee the same results. And I want to repeat that. Copying and pasting the formula does not guarantee the same results, because it wasn't the formula that saved the people, it was the Lord. it wasn't the presence of the Ark of the Covenant that made the walls of Jericho fall down. It was God himself. It wasn't the Ark of the Covenant that suspended the waters. This isn't some sort of like, I don't even know what you would call it. Like this, it was the Lord himself. It was God who did these things. And so this is where this really intersects for us. And I'll grant right at the outset, before I turn this corner here, that the application I'm going to draw out, there are some differences. There are some differences between what we just saw in the story and the application we're going to draw out, but I really think that is a good example for us, an important thing for us to learn. And that's this. God will work in our lives. And maybe that's all you need to hear today. Maybe if nothing else, like maybe that's all you need to hear today is God will work in your life. He will work in your life. He's not distant. He's not aloof. He is. The Bible gives us terminology like he's a very present help in times of trouble. It talks about us being sheltered under his wings. For example, it says that he's near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. We have Psalms saying things like, he has turned for me my mourning into dancing. He has loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness. And so we have, the Bible makes it clear as we look at this, it's like the Lord will work in your life. He will. And if I said, hey, think of some examples of when God worked in your life, you can think of stuff. You can think of stuff right now. It might be someone that he sent to encourage you, or who he just gave just the right words and it was like a balm for your soul. It might have been, when you were reading the scriptures where he just took a specific verse and just lifted it out and just wrote it on your heart in a very meaningful way and spoke to you very powerfully. It could have been during, during prayer, where you just feel like God really began to help you to see things, to understand things, and he began to show you his love for you. It could have been, while you're sitting down journaling sometimes, that you feel like God was present in a very meaningful way. It could have been while talking to a pastor or a counselor or a close friend, and you just feel like God really honored that time and you really benefited from it. And we could go through even more examples. I've talked about declarations on this podcast before. We could say, well, maybe you sat down and wrote out some biblical declarations and started to say these things regularly, and you really found yourself benefiting from it. I mean, I could say, and I'm just giving you lots of examples because I want you to see how broad this is. It could be listening to good teaching or a sermon or a podcast. It could be, just talking to other people. Who knows? You see, the Lord can work in our lives through a variety of ways, and the things I just said are wonderful biblical practices. Obviously, we should be reading the Bible. We should be praying. We should be seeking wise counsel. The Bible's clear about that. We should be declaring truth. We should be listening to good teachings. We should be doing these things. These are ways that the Lord speaks. These are ways that God operates in our lives. However, hear me so clearly. These are ways that God works in our lives. And there's more. I did not just give you an exhaustive list. I just gave you a list of really, common examples. But if you were to think of any way that God has worked in your life, you could probably, add that to the list. Any sort of medium through which he has worked through. But again, God is the one who is working through these things. Kind of like where I highlighted back there in Joshua chapter 6. In fact, I'll flip back here again, where he says, see, I have given Jericho into your hand. I have given Jericho into your hand. And so it is the Lord who is working. So what am I saying? What am I getting at here? This is what I'm saying. There's the danger. And I speak firsthand, personally, because I've done this. There is the danger of looking to a method, a means, a medium of sorts, as opposed to the Lord. I guess I should have said instead of the maker, because that would have been some nice alliteration, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. But anyways, my point is just like we begin to look to the things through which he worked instead of looking to him. Is this making sense? And then, you know what happens? We place our hope in those things, and we actually depend upon God less. And honestly, previously when he did work through those things, he wants us to learn to depend on him. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. We're not trying to move to a place where we depend on God less. We're trying to learn how to depend on him more and more consistently, to talk to him throughout the day. So let me just give you some personal examples of how I've seen this work out in my own life, and hopefully it'll make sense to you. So for example, recently there was someone I felt like the Lord really, through a variety of circumstances, led me to begin asking counsel from and wisdom from, and I stand by that statement. I believe that God led me to do that. And my conversations with this person were like, there was some real power, I feel like some forward movement, some clarity. It was really wonderful. And I was talking to this guy, but there have been a few times recently that when I have walked away from those conversations feeling discouraged and disillusioned, or maybe not disillusioned is the right word, but discouraged and really heavy. And looking back, I'll tell you what I think I was doing. I was going into these conversations with such an expectation specifically of these conversations that they were going to do something in my life or help me in a certain way. And then when they didn't meet that expectation, I was discouraged. But what I had begun to do was place my hope in these conversations as opposed to God, who was the one who blessed them in the first place. And it's almost like when we begin to put our hope in the method instead of in the Lord himself, it's like the water's cut off for that. It's like, no, we can't put our hope in this thing. We put our hope in the Lord, knowing that he works through a variety of ways. Or how about this example? And this is subtle and looks really good from the outside in. If you get up an hour earlier, spend an hour reading the Bible and praying, and then God really honors that and moves in a powerful way. And then what you begin to do is you're like, okay, every day, if I do this exact thing, this formula, then blank will happen. It's like, no. That is putting your faith in a process, not in a person. That is putting your faith in, there's the alliteration. That's putting your faith in, it really is almost kind of like an attempt to control. And so, but it's just, what we have to understand is we relate, we have a relationship with God. We cannot reduce this stuff down to just formulas and methods. And as soon as we do, that we're in a bad place. And the medium through which God has worked in the past might seem to temporarily run dry. And what we need to do is not stop doing that thing. I mean, it's great to seek godly counsel. It's great to reach out to other people, ask them to pray for you. Obviously, it's great to read the Bible and pray, but to recalibrate ourselves and realize, hey, God can speak to me whenever and however he wants throughout the course of the day, and I'm not maintaining his good favor. He has given that to me freely as a result of, what Jesus Christ has done on my behalf. And so I'm going to seek him. I'm going to seek him. And so I think whenever we put our confidence and our faith in these processes, it's really just an attempt at control. And if we really are believing what I'm saying right now, then what will happen is we'll talk to God all throughout the day. And we won't look to something or some person exclusively, but ultimately, the God who spoke by them, who encouraged us. I hope this is making sense, but let me read some scriptures. Psalm 127:1 says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain." And so you have this activity, the person building the house and the watchman staying awake, but the psalmist says, unless the Lord builds the house, unless the Lord watches over the city, it's all pointless. Proverbs 21:31 says something very similar. It says, "The horse is made ready for the day of battle, but the victory belongs to the Lord." One thing that my pastor points out about this verse in Proverbs here is the dual activity of God and people, where it's like, yes, the horse is made ready for the day of battle, but God is the one who gives the victory. Does that mean that the horse shouldn't be made ready for the day of battle? Or going back to Psalm 127, does that mean the watchman shouldn't stay awake, or the people shouldn't strive to build the house? Well, no, but the point is, unless God works, it's all pointless. Is the point. How about this? Psalm 33:16-19. "The king is not saved by his great army. A warrior is not delivered by his great strength. The war horse is a false hope for salvation, and by its great might it cannot rescue. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his steadfast love, that he may deliver their soul from death and keep them alive in famine." Now, this is something I want to point out. So it's talking about how the king is not saved by his great army, the warrior is not delivered by his great strength, and the war horse is a false hope of salvation. But point out this. I want to point out this. When we look in the, and think about throughout the Old Testament, when God delivered the people, I mean, it could take the form of a military victory. Let's look at Jericho again. And so, but we just have to realize that it was not the strength of the warrior. Yes, God delivered through the battle, but it was God who delivered. Psalm 44, 5-6. Through you we push down our foes. Through your name we tread down those who rise up against us. For not in my bow do I trust, nor can my sword save me. Psalm 121, 1-2. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. And then this is, I mean, I could keep going through verses, but I just want to land here on Psalm 62, 5-6. It says, For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation. My fortress, I shall not be shaken. Wendell Kimbrough has a song where he turned Psalm 62 into a song, and it's really, really wonderful. But this verse here, Psalm 62, 5-6, notice it again. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. And so I just want to ask you this question, because I've seen myself do it. Whenever God moves, do you immediately cling on to the method through which he moved, or do you continue to look to him and say, For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence? He only is my rock, and so, or do you focus on the method? Do you grab onto the method, be like, oh, God really spoke to me through this one sermon, and so I'm just going to really just listen to every single thing that this person says, and this is going to, and again, there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with having favorite preachers, but I just want to caution you against putting your faith in people. And it's like, yes, God works through people very clearly. I hope he's working through this podcast in your life, but let me say it clearly. If you benefit from this, it's because God blessed it. Because the Lord is the one who blesses it. The Lord is the one who speaks to our hearts. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And so, do you cling to the method? Do you figuratively try to grab the Ark of the Covenant and bring it into battle, thinking that God has to do something? Or do you just truly look to God? What's interesting to me about that passage in 1 Samuel 4, you know what? It doesn't say anywhere. And the elders sought the Lord. It doesn't say anyone sought the Lord. Yeah, and there's other passages where in battles, it's like the individual did seek the Lord, like David in 2 Samuel 5. And guess what? The Lord spoke. He told him exactly what to do. And the Lord delivered them. And so I just wonder, it's like if they had just stopped and sought the Lord, what would have happened? Well, we don't know. Because instead of actually seeking God, they just went and grabbed for this method. Does this all make sense? And so let's just not fall into the same trap. Let's be careful. Let's be so careful not to fall into that exact same trap. Let's seek God, and not put all of our hope in a method, in the medium through which he worked. We got to hope in him, because like I said earlier, if we begin to put all of our hope in a method, that actually diminishes dependence on God. That diminishes intimacy with him. That increases things like a notion of control, and it's probably motivated by something like by fear, and it quickly becomes legalism as well. Like I said with it's like, okay, I have to read my Bible this long and pray this long, or else God won't speak to me. But if I do, and so on and so forth, it's like that quickly becomes just this rote exercise that's devoid of life and vibrancy, and it's not actually spending time with God. It's, I guess you could say it like this: anytime you make a means the end, we're off track. And the Bible, it's a means to the end of knowing God more. Prayer, it's not just some activity, it's the means to the end of knowing God more. These are things about knowing God more. And so I could go on more, but I think the point has been made. And I hope that as we've been talking through this, that the Lord has perhaps shown where you might be doing this. Because if you are doing this and then you shed that, you drop that off, it's wonderful. It's wonderful, and it will lead to you talking to God all throughout the day, probably more, and it's going to, you'll do a lot of the same things. You might even do more of the same things. You may find yourself spending more time in the scriptures, but the point is going to be different, and the feel is going to be different. You're going to be seeking a person, not checking a box. You're going to be seeking God, not trying to embrace a formula. You're going to be trusting him. So I hope this has been helpful. As always, hope it's been encouraging. And I hope it's made sense. So thank you so much for listening. I just want to talk about the Bible is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which means that any and all gifts given to the ministry are indeed tax deductible. If you feel so led to give, you can find instructions on how to do so in the footer of every episode description. And thank you so much to those of you who have already given. It is so appreciated. So thank you guys again for joining me. I hope it's been encouraging. Until next time, God bless you.